and welcome to episode 206 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is August 29th, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So in previous episodes, we talked about the new single sign-on capabilities of the SAP ERP Connector and the SAP OData Connector. We talked about the benefits and also showed how this can be used in Power Automate, Copilot Studio, and other applications. Talking about SSO is always a little complicated, but today we will take a closer look on how to set up principal propagation with Power Platform and SAP using the SAP OData Connector. For this, we are very happy to have Scott Woodall and Martin Pankraz with us again. So before we get started, Martin, Scott, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself.
Go ahead, Scott, you first.
Hi, thanks for having me on, Holger. Name is Scott Woodall, Principal Software Engineer here at Microsoft. And I've been here almost 3 years. Microsoft acquired a SAP startup a few years ago. And so I work primarily on connecting Power Platform related connectors into SAP.
Perfect. Well, it's great to have you, Scott.
Thank you.
Martin.
Be nice. Martin Pankraz. I'm the same team as Holger is. And I have the pleasure of working with all the product groups that interface with SAP and Microsoft, and Power Platform being one of the prominent ones there. And taking care of the integration between the systems is like the best part. Yeah? And this is also core to our job here as product managers in Azure Core, working on the product groups that interface with SAP workloads, as well as with SAP as our engineering partner. So this is like the coolest thing. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Martin, a few weeks ago, you joined us here again with Shalja, and you introduced the new capabilities with the SAP OData Connector and SAP ERP Connector, actually. I think in the past, or the connector has been around now for quite some time. I think we also see some good traction with customers on this. But I think one thing that was really missing, so that was a clear feedback that we got from customers, which actually we had communicated and knew before that in order to really deploy this on at scale in a productive environment, they need to have single sign-on in place. And obviously there are multiple options how to do this. And a few weeks ago, you showed us actually how this looks like. So maybe before we take a closer look behind the scenes, maybe you can quickly start by showing us how does it look like on a Power Automate side.
Seeing is believing, right? So we don't look at standard documents and stuff. Yeah? And we've been working with Scott and the team on all the aspects that come with this. And another team member was working on the certificate part, but Scott was really focusing on the OAuth capabilities. Yeah? And when you say single sign-on in the SAP world, that's referred to as SAP principal propagation, because you're mapping users from one identity pod to another one, so to say. Yeah? And we'll be looking at the details for that, and Scott will be chipping in on like his aspects, since he was the lead developer on bringing this to life, actually. Yeah?
Perfect, yeah.
All right, let me share my screen. And we'll be kicking off from Power Automate.
Perfect.
You said before, we have like many Microsoft apps that communicate with this. Power Automate is the workflow engine underneath. If you're calling this from Copilot Studio, Power Apps, other M365 products that are able to do this, you can also spin up things from Power BI and from SharePoint lists. So there's like a big portfolio of things from where you can call Power Automate. And in here, we have a very simple flow that I triggered manually just for the purpose of triggering it. But in a custom scenario, likely you would have a UI on top of this Power App with buttons, lists, where you trigger the interactions from there and filling that parameters.
Or as you said, this could be a Power App also embedded in Teams or something like that, or from Excel. And since I am authenticated already in Teams or Excel or in the Power App, when I open the Power App for the first time, these credentials then can somehow magically be forwarded or exchanged then to the SAP system.
Exactly. Yeah, this is actually the capability that Scott added, to be able to reuse the login context from the Microsoft product that is triggering the request.
Because
so I believe, Martin, in the upper right, you have MP in the browser, Martin Pankraz, meaning you're obviously already logged in a browser session.
Yes.
Correct? Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the interesting thing is this token that we have now from Entra ID is not something that we can just hand over to the SAP system and the SAP system is happy. So you, Scott, Martin, you needed to do something in between to make that actually happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And we will be seeing the details of how that looks like in like a couple of schematics and sketches to really visualize it better. But now let's see this run, so that we can see it live. So I'm triggering this manual flow, hitting run flow, done, and we will be now seeing a operational flow here, and we will be checking the actual steps. Like I said, we have the manual trigger. In here, I have pre-configured a OData request that queries for the business partner set. This is a standard demo OData service that all the SAP gateway systems have. The GW sample basic, very prominent sample on all the blocks. And we're querying for a couple of business partners. Then we're reading one individual one, which you need to do in order to get the CSRF tokens and e-tags flowing, right? And this is actually happening under the hood, right, Scott? Yeah. So you're taking care of all of these specialities.
The SAP OData Connector will handle the CSRF tokens for the customers, so they don't have to worry about managing that aspect of the OData calls. The connector is handling it for them.
Which is super powerful. Yeah. Because in the very beginning, I used the HTTP connector to do this. And then you needed to do all these steps: call, fetch, extract the e-tag, extract the CSRF token, then reformat it, put it back in the next call. It was a huge mess. And now it's really nice that you just can open the SAP OData Connector and it handles. I mean, obviously not for the read, we don't need these things, but for the update then after.
For the next step, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And this came down from 10 requests down to 3, yeah. And the nastiest one to me was the cookie handling, because you need to retain the right session parameters. And all of this is now done because of the beautiful implementation that Scott did for this.
Cool.
All right, so that's the working sample. The connection I can show quickly. When you create a new connection on Power Automate, you will have this new authentication type like we saw last time with Schaljan. You feed your database URI, and this is the most complex part where you actually have the contract with Entra ID that you need to supply so you can kick off the flow that is trusted and authorized with SAP.
And we'll see this later also when we take a look at the Entra ID. But I think it's important to highlight here that there's no username here. There's no password in this specific screen. Because
exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. When you click connect on this, you get the pop-up from Microsoft Login. You supply your identity, MFA, whatever is needed, and then you create the connection. And everyone else using your flow will then be asked on the very first time, do you authorize this login request? And then you're fine. Then you will be talking to SAP all the time. Yeah, and Scott is then handling the refreshes, etc.
Okay, perfect. So now we have what it looks like on the Power Automate side. In the end, as you said, you call the GW Basic Sample OData service. So maybe we can jump right back to the very source of everything, to our SAP system and take a look, maybe a high level look at the OData service, or some of the required steps to configure this OAuth flow.
Yeah, so we've spawned the whole request sequence. It goes through API management. Yeah? and we can see the results on the famous security diagnostic tool, which is a web intro that SAP has still on all the ERPs and S4 systems. And in here, I've had a trace file recording the requests that went through the OData OAuth client that we configured. So let me quickly pull this to the side. So when we check the, so this is the recorded stuff. And here you see the OAuth client configuration. Yeah? So this is the OAuth client we're using. We'll see this on API management being supplied. This is having trust with my Entra ID tenant. And in here we have also the scopes. Which OData services is this OAuth client be authorized to issue tokens for? Yeah? So it's not giving you access. It's only there for the purpose of requesting tokens. Yeah? And this is where it's authorized to issue for. Yeah?
Perfect. So this is something that I need to configure in the SAP system.
Yes.
In order so that the whole flow actually can work.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think the APIM layer is configured with this user to then do the token swap with SAP.
Exactly. Yeah. And we can see this happening on the. This is also the troubleshooting tool there is. If you have any challenges with this, you will be here a lot. And you see there's 47 messages on this. And of course, it expired. Yeah. So, but now here I am. So when we scroll to the very bottom, the last message you want to see is that the mapping mode was actually triggered. It was taking my Microsoft user and was mapping it to a known SAP backend user.
That's actually a good point. So a mapping takes place. So where do we do this mapping?
The mapping?
Because actually, that's a really good point again. So because in Power Automate, we obviously authenticate with our Entra ID user, but the SAP system knows the SAP user. So where do we do this mapping? That my Entra ID user is this specific SAP user.
That's a good question, Holger. There's a couple of attributes, but the one that we usually use is the email address. And when we check this APIM testing user that we saw that was doing the mapping, we can find my email address here. And because of that, we can make that mapping. And since we have the trust between this Entra ID tenant that I showed and this SAP system, we trust that this request should be allowed.
So you are in this SU01, I believe, user transaction, where showing that user SAP username APMG test, and it has that email address of Martin Pankraz, at Microsoft.com, and basically then this is kind of mapped through the email address, right?
Which makes a lot of sense because the email address is typically unique, bound to a specific user. As you said, Martin, I guess it's also possible to potentially map other properties, other fields, but obviously the email address is a very good logical choice for this.
Yes. We have some customers that have fictitious emails that only exist internally and that are not synced to Entra ID. Those customers then have challenges because they need to make changes for this to work. But I've seen it less and less in the past years.
Okay,
and
perfect.
Then the compliance thing. So we saw the role or the scopes of the OAuth client. We also have to assign a certain role to that user. And when we check the authorizations page, we've created a custom role. And in here, you will see also the scope authorization object, which has assigned the two OData services, but we have been using the last one here, the GW sample basic. But I could also request this other API with the same user. And it's up to the customer now to decide how many scopes do they assign to the client, how many clients do they have, how do they manage this at scale. And we would recommend not to do star on this and authorize everything, but that's like customer decision.
And I guess that's the very same when we look at the RFC ACLs. There you typically also have a profile that you allow a user to call an RFC, and you can define star, then they can call all the RFCs, or you can be very, very specific, like what are the RFCs that should be allowed to call. And here it's the same thing. I can specify which OData services can be actually executed here via OAuth.
Exactly, yeah, and it's all standard process. There's nothing we invented. This is like standardized and how SAP wants this to work. So
perfect.
So we've seen a couple of details. Now let's look at the schematic that I promised. So we've touched everything in the two gray columns here on the left. And we had a look at the last column with the scope authorizations. And for the OAuth server, we checked the OAuth client setup. Yeah? So we've already seen a good bunch of the involved parts here. Yeah? So next, I will open the Azure API Management part, which actually takes away the whole burden of this token dance. Yeah? We have to do many things, but the low coder only cares about really the connection where he says, I want enter ID, and here I get supplied this application ID URI that points to API management, and I'm done. The rest happens on my user automatically. Yeah?
And that's really, really powerful. And I think we talked already last time that the policy that you had created goes actually an even further step. But for now, let's not concentrate too much on the additional cool features of the policy, like the caching and the throttling components that you had, but really just focus on the token exchange.
So we'll be checking the token exchange. So we will be receiving the token that Scott generated on his connector. We'll be exchanging that to a SAML assertion, which SAP then can understand and do the mapping of my user to the named SAP backend user and give us a OAuth BIRA token for the final request.
And so with this OAuth BIRA token, we then do the call to the OData service in the SAP backend system, which then is trusted. So I start with a token from Enter ID that I'm getting in this specific case here via the Power Automate flow, via the connector. Then I do the exchange, and then I send the final token to the SAP OData service in the end, where everything is authenticated.
Exactly, yeah. And we need to take this extra step because SAP only accepts tokens it issued itself. It's not trusting anyone else to do that. So now I'm in Azure in API Management. If you remember, this is the API we've been using on Power Automate. Hello from Power. I think Scott has been like seeing this or copying this URL like 10,000 times until we had it all working properly.
Yes, very familiar with that URL.
Well, some things you can just repeat then when you wake up early or late at night. So in here, that's the typical normal setup where for any API, we're taking the base URL. And the policy that we're using in here is actually from a template that can be pasted as is. So you can browse to our API policy snippets library. This is linked from the Microsoft Docs. The API management team takes care of this. In here, we have a specialized one for the principal propagation. So you go in here, you just copy the thing. No changes needed, just as is. Go back, paste it here, and start your configuration. The configuration here is for simple starting. So that's why we have it on the named values. All the parameters that you need, like the OAuth client ID that we saw before, the scopes needed, etc. They need to be maintained somewhere for the API.
Security aspects of this. So on line 35 there, where you have the audience defined.
Yes.
That is the same GUID that matches what is supplied in the connection on Power Automate.
Good point. Yeah, exactly, Scott. So we are sure that from where this is coming, that we're actually supplying something that is expected. So no other consumer that is not able to generate a token that has the correct audience can consume this. And it's impossible to get to this point with the correct audience if you're not trusted and authorized the right way. So this is actually something that went through Microsoft security review for us to even release this. So
customers wouldn't be able to put any GUID they want when they create their connection. It's going to be an app that lives within their tenant.
Exactly. we had to really carefully look this all up so that security would actually let us pass.
So basically, it can be misused.
Yeah, of course, this is text only here, right?
Yeah.
But the what you're able to generate, you can only have your consumer app generate a token with this audience if you're actually part of this tenant. So Goran cannot log in on this environment because you're not part of this tenant. So you cannot spoof this. You will never be able to have a token that has this property if you're not already assigned to this tenant.
Yeah.
And on the variables, they are on the name values, but they could also come from Key Vault or from other places where you store your secrets. So that's customer decision. But in here, we've taken the easy route with the named values, where you have a token store or a secret store that comes with every API management instance.
So, but can you show us where do we get these secrets and tokens? I think we have a few places where we need to do the configuration on Entra ID and on the SAP side to get these tokens or to get these values here.
So the OAuth scope we can take from the OAuth2 configuration. So we're using this. This is the client ID name, OData OAuth MS. So this is the first entry here, the client ID for this one. This is a user, also a system user on the SAP backend.
SE01.
Yeah, SE01. So this, like I said, is a system type user, which also has logon data. So you're taking the password that is associated with this.
And basically in Azure API Management, I go through this list. I add all these values. So I need to talk to my SAP counterpart who has access to this. This person would give me all these information. I would add them here or in Azure API Management. And then I would do the same with Entra ID.
Exactly, yeah. The scope you take from here. Yeah, so we already have the client ID with the secrets from the user. We have the scope. Now we need also the sub-resource and the client ID and secret for the API management part. So the resource here comes from the enterprise app. So that's here. And I think I got this, needs to go away. So, and from here we have also the app registration that represents my API management. In here you will find the secret we're using. And since Nupur has been testing our colleague a lot, now it's a personal secret. we're using it.
Cool. But for me, sorry, go ahead.
Maybe touch base on the SAP provider name, the URI compliant.
You want this one, yeah? Or the other one?
The identifier there. Just maybe mention that Entra ID requires that to be in a URI format. So something to take note of when you're configuring this on the SAP side, if you're setting this up for the first time. So you don't have to cause yourself some headaches later down the road.
Exactly, yeah.
Is not a URI.
This is also something, like I mentioned before, with the fictitious emails that are not synced to Entra ID or formerly Azure ID. This can also be a topic where someone created a SAML provider before, where this was not a topic yet. And then this has been just text, which is not URI compliant. So then it cannot be imported on our end. But I haven't seen this issue also a couple of years now. So it seems to have been corrected in most of the customers.
Everybody knows if they have to integrate with Azure, they don't want to go back and do all the extra legwork. So set it up with URI compliant from the start.
It's true, yeah.
So basically what we're doing, if I remember your flow chart basically that you showed, the API management in the middle. So it connects to both, obviously, the SAP system on the right and the Entra ID system on the left, basically. So that's why we need some configuration input from both sides, basically. And that's what you just showed in the policy, where we have the different variables, and you just need to copy and paste, basically, information from the SAP side, from the Entra side, into the policy, and then you're good to go with the policy.
Exactly, yeah. We were practically checking the purple and the green like boxes, yeah. Do we have the trust setup? Do we have the authorization? And does all of it connect, so to say?
Nice.
Yeah, and from here, so from the API management part, we can see this is the scope you need to authorize. And you see down here are 3 clients. One of them is the like the other things they were using, where they actually authorize to use this. And here's also the ID for Scott's connector, which has its own public ID that every customer needs to supply here. That's all in the documentation.
First-party app within Power Platform that is explicit and only used for the SAP OData Connector.
Exactly, yeah. And this way you have full control. Yeah. So the colleague at the customer who wants to allow OData from Power Platform to go through API management to SAP explicitly makes that configuration here. Otherwise, it wouldn't go through.
Perfect, yeah.
All right. So that means we have covered all the variables. The rest is done for you. Cache lookup, all the requests, and we can check the requests in detail from Postman, so we can see the token flows.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to go at, because in this policy, you're doing actually quite a few calls. So because as you said, you receive one token, but then you need to call another URL, exchange this token, get something back, call yet another URL. So that's what is all listed here in the policy, which actually is also really good because it's very transparent. Everyone can go through this and understand it. So there's nothing dangerous or fishy happening here. This is really all documented. And if you are not happy with something, you can actually go in there and change it. But I always love when I try to do these steps, I as you said, I love to do this in Postman very manually, just to see what actually happens. And maybe, yeah, as you just said, maybe we can try to reproduce this whole flow in Postman. So I guess starting potentially with the initial call that we would receive from Power Automate, from the SAP OData Connector.
Exactly, yeah. And this is code-based here on the policy. So you can actually also apply things like Visual Studio Code. You can debug through each line. You can have GitHub Copilot run on this, suggest code changes, etc. Yeah? Because this is inline C# code here. Yeah? So this is having this code-based really gives you scale because you can do this on DevOps pipelines and etc. Yeah? So this is really makes this enterprise ready. Yeah? So I don't have Postman, I have Bruno, but I hope you like the dog here as well. Yeah? So maybe that's a good one, chasing the Postman. Yeah? In here, I have a version of the public Postman collection that is also shared and linked from the blog post, etc., so that everyone can really get started from scratch and have a seamless experience with this. In here, I've already before used this login URL to get myself a token. This is the same thing that the OData Connector on Power Platform does.
And you would get this token, basically. That's a starting point also in the policy. So the API management policy would receive this specific token here. Or well, not this is obviously the URL, but the token that you have somewhere beneath.
The token, because I need to do this interactively with me personally using a browser, right? Because I'm not a service. Yeah. And to do this, I generated this intermediate request where you have this special response mode. And this response mode gives you the token on the URL as
there we are.
As parameter. Yeah? So this is where the token came from. Yeah? And if we haven't been talking too long, it's still valid and I can still use it. And here we will be seeing, I'm supplying again my APIM stuff, the resource we were talking about. And this is the first request that also happens on the policy. And we're supplying here the token. We're running the request. We saw it thinking, and we are getting the response.
Perfect.
With the X token here. And we have a post-processing of this, where we then go in here. This is exposing the OAuth token endpoint from SAP, also through API management, because we have a private SAP. Yeah? So I cannot reach this without VPN or with inside the virtual network. That's why I expose this here for the purpose of showing this. And this is the third request that we need to do, again, using the OAuth client that we saw before. And from here, we will then receive the final token.
Exactly, because now just to highlight, you're now calling the SAP system. So yes. Before that, this was a call to Entra ID. Now we are calling the SAP system to get, as you said, the required tokens to connect to the actual OData service on the SAP system.
Exactly, yeah. And here's the standard path for all of the SAP systems and its OAuth server. And in here, then you see the access token with its expiry time that you configure on the OAuth server. We have typically 1 hour, and it's telling you which scope, which OData service this token is allowed to be used for. And we'd also take the refresh token so that we can refresh the connection whenever it expires automatically.
And it's the APIM policy that's doing this. Like if we were just using Power Automate, it's the APIM policy that's doing this part for you. And then the second post request that you had, that's the SAP OData Connector that's managing that token for you and the lifecycle and the refreshes of that. So you don't have to worry about constantly refreshing your token from Power Platform. Internal services are taking care of that for you. And then it sends this token to APIM, and then APIM does the token swap for you. SAP side.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the beauty of the token dance. And let's get back to the drawing here. So we've managed to get this flowing here, the Microsoft ecosystem with all the M365 services, also D365, everything that can talk to Power Automate. Go through API management using the policy and the name values with the configuration. You saw we need 5 values. And then from there, through the trust setup and the authorizations we did, we can talk to all the SAP systems that support this SAP principal propagation with OAuth 2 SAML as the flow. And we did today the S4HANA Cloud Private Edition, so to say. Yeah? But it would also work with any SAP gateway. And I'm in the process of releasing this also for SuccessFactors. Yeah? And basically, we did this also with S4HANA Public Cloud before. A nice partner conversation on this one where they execute this at scale. And but it works for all the other products too.
Cool. And I think, I mean, obviously, this is really, really powerful. And the one of the other beautiful things there is that if a customer has some other configurations, they would only need to adjust the policy, maybe add a few things, maybe change some things, but the overall flow, like from Power Automate to the Azure API Management, there's nothing that needs to be changed. I, as a customer, can then be very, very flexible when it comes to what are the specific things in my SAP system, and then I can connect to my SAP system.
Exactly, yeah. And we see here the network boundaries. Azure API Management can be VNet injected for private systems. And Power Automate, Sharjah shared it last time, has also an item on the roadmap to bring Power Automate also into your VNet. So with the next round, you can actually have the whole sequence be completely private and isolated from the internet.
Cool, yeah. No, this is really, really powerful stuff, I would say.
Yeah, cool. It was a nice journey. Really cool to do this with Scott. We had some nice sessions on this, and enjoyed the journey, Scott. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been invaluable with providing expertise and guidance on the APIM side and the SAP side on how to set this up and do the correct token swaps. So greatly appreciate your and Holger's help along the way. as we've had questions on how to implement some of this stuff. So appreciate it.
I'm sure we'll bang our heads against other walls when we go to the next elevations of this.
But the results speak for themselves. No, I really think this is now an enterprise-ready solution, and I'm looking forward for more and more customers to adopt this really in an enterprise productive fashion. I mean, just a call out. Obviously, the video today was not supposed to be a how-to guide or a tutorial, but I think it's always nice to see the end-to-end flow and to take a look at some of the configurations. Maybe if you are in the process of setting this up, maybe if you're following the official documentation to set this up and you want to see the end results, then this is perfect. Now you have seen some key parts of this journey. You called out Postman or
this one is Bruno.
Bruno, thank you. To test this, you also highlighted the security trace, the troubleshooting transactions on the SAP side, which probably is very helpful. And I think that's exactly what will hopefully help a lot of customers to get started and to implement these scenarios.
Yeah, the blog post shows our video series where we went through like a unprepared, what do you call, it was not staged. Yeah, we were just trying from scratch. We had systems fully fresh installed and wanted to see if we can get it done. So this was like a helpful exercise. And at the very bottom of this, there's also a troubleshooting guide that talks about the various places, things that can go wrong, where to go. We saw the SAC DIAC tool, WebTune Pro talks about don't forgetting about the clients, the error log on the OData side, the Postman collection to do the manual test, and where to go look to decode the SAML assertions, the JOT tokens, etc. Yeah? And of course, the Visual Studio Code extension to debug the policy step by step, so you can run it as code. Yeah?
Fantastic.
Hitchhiker YouTube guides were very helpful. We also have some documentation coming out. It's currently under review on doing a step-by-step. So we'll be able to publish that for customers to consume if they do want to just start from step 0 and then go through all the steps. We'll have something like that published here within a couple of weeks.
Cool. And we will put all the links once they are available in the show notes, so that from here hopefully you can easily get this additional information and get started.
And today we have done Azure API Management, but we know that some customers also like BTP. So we'll have like a session again with Vinayak from SAP on how to do this with SAP's API Management as well. And the policy there is also published officially even, yeah. So there will be a nice continuation of this.
This was a small teaser, Martin. This was not supposed to happen. This was supposed to be a surprise, but okay.
You think? But it's already published. Yeah?
No, the results, but that we want to have Vinayak and you again to talk about SAP API Management.
Okay, then you have to cut it out.
Christmas in August.
Good, perfect. No, I think Martin, Scott, I think that was a great run through the configuration. I think that really provided us with a good overview on what it actually means to set this up and where do I need to look and all some good information. So thank you so much for joining us today. And as you said, Martin, we will have you again. Maybe Scott will have you also again on the show in the future.
I'd love to.
For now, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll see each other again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.